Hi, everyone. So, as some of you may or may not know, Screencasts Online is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, and I thought it might be a nice idea to spend some time with the visionary, the god, the entrepreneurial talent who came up with the premise all those years ago and built it into I guess you could call it an Apple institution that it is today. So that person is, of course, none other than Donald McAllister, Mr. Screencasts Online himself. Welcome, Don.
Hello, Lee. What's it? I don't often get called Donald, my full name.
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm your parent or something like that. That's,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, a bit strange, but yeah, we got to give you your full title. I was going to call you Sir Donald, but I
No,
don't
well,
quite have
no,
that power.
no.
That'd be warranted. But this is definitely an achievement to be celebrated for sure. And I know there's going to be lots of people who watch this, current members, ex-members, friends that you've made along the way that are certainly going to want to pass on their congratulations. If that is you and you're watching, then please leave Don a congratulatory message below in the comments. He certainly deserves it. However, I'm sure they're going to be very interested in like the backstory of Screencasts Online, how you made it happen, and I guess why you wanted to come up with this as well. Now, I'm sure you've been over this like many times in the past. However, for old time's sake and
For old times.
maybe one last time, what made you come up with the idea for Screencasts Online?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is hard to believe it's 20 years. That's just phenomenal. It's gone by so quickly, and it's been really enjoyable as well. I've enjoyed every minute of it. But the genesis of it really was back in the day. I mean, it might come as a surprise to people that I used to be a PC user, because in the corporate job that I had, we didn't really use Macs. I'd had some exposure to Macs for our design studio. I procured some Macs and assisted setting them up. But in the day-to-day things, it was all Windows PCs and Windows NT and stuff like that. So I was getting a bit jaded with Windows and with computing in general. It just seemed to be, I seemed to keep buying more and more expensive machines and they didn't run that much faster. And I just stumbled across a video of Steve Jobs' presentation when he actually launched the Mac Mini. And they brought it to the UK as well because the laptops, although they were around, they were still quite expensive. But the Mac Mini seemed to be a really good entry-level platform. And I was into video production then as well, with camcorders and stuff. So I thought, well, I'll give it. It wasn't that expensive. So I bought my first Mac, and I was blown away by it. Really, I think it was the performance of it in such a small machine, especially when doing video editing. This was like proper video editing, not the screencast. I wasn't into that at that point. And I sort of really enjoyed it, started to evangelize about it to my family and friends. And then one of my family members also decided to go down that route as well because I've been banging on about it so much, how great it was. So she bought one, but she lived about 50 miles away from where I was, so I couldn't really just nip down and show her, how it worked. So I created some tutorials for her using screen capture tools. And I really enjoyed doing them. It was great. I wasn't having a particularly good time at work at the time, and it was a nice release to actually do these. And she enjoyed them. So eventually, I mean, it was the very beginning of podcasting as well, and I was sort of scratching around because I got quite interested in podcasts. I used to watch all the current. There weren't that many at the time, and when I say watch, I used to listen to podcasts because there weren't many video podcasts at the
No,
time,
absolutely,
if any. So I sort of got into podcasting and I was scratching around for an idea of what to create because I wanted to create a podcast. And I thought, well, I'll create a podcast about the Mac, an audio podcast. So I got the gear, I got the domain name even, I think. It wasn't Screencast Online, it was something else. And I got the microphone and I got all the laptop set up and everything. And I thought, right, I'm going to record my first audio podcast now. And then didn't really know what to talk about. It was one of those things sort of, I'm thinking I'm going to have to revisit this, think of another idea. And then the idea of actually posting the video tutorials I'd done for my sister-in-law, it was at the time. I thought, well, I could do that because it's just media, it's digital format. Bandwidth was an issue, if I'm honest, because we couldn't really do HD video and transmit it. The bandwidth was quite expensive at the time. But things sort of fell into place. Libsyn, who we're still with at the moment, who do all our hosting, they came onto the scene, and that was an affordable way of actually sending video via a podcast. And so initially it was just a hobby. I was still sort of working at the time. It was just a hobby for something to do at the weekend. It really got some traction. People really enjoyed it. And it got to the point where I really wanted to exit my corporate job. And people started wanting to send me money because it was a free service at the time,
Yeah.
and people wanted to support it. And I sort of thought about it and thought, well, if I can create more content and perhaps higher quality format content, I might be able to charge for it, But I was always very against that idea. I still wanted to produce the free content. So initially I thought, well, we'll just do like one tutorial a month, which will be a paid for one, and then the other three will be free tutorials. And over the, set Screencasts Online, did the first one, went down really well, got lots of interest from people. I actually did an interview with Scoble, Robert Scoble.
Yes, I do. Yeah,
Yeah, he's an American guy. He used to work for Microsoft, and he's sort of very much into social media. And he came to the UK and wanted to interview entrepreneurs and new businesses. And I'd just launched Screencasts Online, so I went down to specifically went down to London to have an interview with him, and that actually gave it quite a good kickstart. I got quite a few new subscribers through the interview with Scoble. And that's actually still around. I think that's still on YouTube somewhere. I think it's.
Oh, well, we'll have to have a look for that and get that in the description then. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to seek that out. So anyway, over time, the paid for content, as more members came on board, the paid for content sort of eclipsed the free content. And after about a good year or so, I went full time doing Screencasts Online. And the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, it is indeed. And can you remember, actually, you're talking about Libsyn. I went through the Libsyn kind of archives to try and pull out the first ever production that you made. It was on August the 19th in 2005, which is obviously 20th anniversary. So can you remember what that was?
I can't. No,
you can't.
You have to surprise me.
So it was actually audio only that you that you created.
Was it a welcome? Just
it was a welcome. But what it's got is your first ever jingle that you created.
Right.
Yeah. And if you're happy with me to share that, then
go on.
Absolutely going to pop that. So can you see that on the screen here?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. So if I press play, hopefully the sound will come through.
Hi, and welcome to Screencasts Online.
Can you hear that jingle playing? Are you sure you didn't record this in the 1980s? I mean,
I've got a story about that when it's finished. Yeah, it's actually not a jingle. It's actually a piece from one of my favorite bands at the time. A band called It Bites. And it's just one segment in like a 15-minute track. I'll dig out what the name of the track is. But I thought that was such a cool background track. I thought it was like a great backing track for like a sports theme or something, like, where they're telling you the headlines and that's going on in the background. So
I just felt like there was going to be some like news results or scores or football scores coming up on the screen at the time when I first heard it.
No, and I always wondered if I actually might get collared. Excuse me, sir, you can't use that jingle. So that's why I did change it after a couple of months.
Yeah,
but no, that original one is It Bites, one of my favorite bands from that time. Yeah.
And the first topic that you covered as an actual video topic. And I am going to put this, because I've been able to get hold of it, so I am going to put this on YouTube. Okay. So
was it about RSS?
It was about RSS, indeed.
There we go.
And it was about 6 minutes long. And it does show how far we've come in how we screencast, that's for sure. Because it was great. You started off fantastically, but the way that obviously it's evolved over time is amazing. Not just obviously the quality of the screencast, but just macOS itself. Yes. Looking at the way macOS used to be 20 years ago, it's definitely worth clicking on this video and having a look and seeing how things used to be. But yeah, you've talked about obviously, the reasons for deciding that you wanted to bring Screencasts Online in. You've talked about obviously the change from moving from it being a side hustle to your full-time gig. What kind of challenges do you think that you found over the course of the first, 5 to 10 years of having it and making sure that it was continually growing when other things were starting to appear at the same time?
I think it's always just been the quality of the content, and actually being. I think it turned into a bit of a recommendation engine as well, because I would never cover something that I would never recommend to people. So if there's 5 word processing programs, I'd cover 1 word processing program because that's the one that I preferred and that liked and I thought had more features than the others. So it was never. I didn't really ever do comparison things. This is one spreadsheet and this is another. I always just sort of focused on one topic. But I mean, some of the challenges in the early days was the mechanics of it, how to actually create a membership system. Because there wasn't really that much software available. I remember the very first membership system I mean, I had a server, and it was I can't remember what it's called now. It was based on HT access, that little hidden file.
Oh yeah, that little hidden file that I can never find in the server. Yeah,
there was a script that used to add people and take people away from the HT access file to give them access to private folders on a certain server. So that was quite difficult. And then eventually, again, we didn't have WordPress with this membership stuff. There was no real membership software out there. And then Amember I discovered, which seemed to be the most. This was 2 or 3 years later. So I migrated that old rudimentary system into Amember, and that seemed to do everything I needed it to do, which was great. But then, and I mentioned before, the bandwidth was always an issue because it was so expensive. But Libsyn were great because they charged on the amount of storage, not on the amount of downloads. So in theory, I could have unlimited downloads as long as I paid for the storage that was on their systems. And for a video service, that was crucial because if you do get successful, and again, I was looking at producing HD content, so there were quite large files. So it might seem silly now for people saying, well, 100 megabytes, not large. But in those days, to download a 100 megabyte video file was a big deal. So Libsyn actually empowered me to do that and not worry about getting too successful too early.
We've got something similar, I think, that's going to be happening soon with Libsyn in that, obviously, because we're still using Libsyn now, as you know. Currently, we've got 1080p and 720p files, haven't we, that we can do? But the 720p files, I'm not convinced are really needed that much anymore. Right. However, the 4K videos, when I do export them occasionally, do look very good. So we're going to need to, over the course of the next year, I think, one thing that we'll be planning is switching across to 4K content. But obviously, that comes with, download speeds and also obviously storage costs.
Which it's these days it's not as big an issue as it was then, but there was no, the thought of 4K, and I don't think we could actually produce 4K in those days anyway. So 1080 that was the highest resolution we can go to. And I guess ScreenCastsONLINE was one of the first ones to do high definition content, and that was one of the reasons for doing the membership, and adding extra value. We gave extra high quality video tutorials that people could download.
So you ran ScreenCastsONLINE for a phenomenal amount of time before it started to get to a point where you wanted to kind of release the reins a little bit, and the one-man band became like a two-man band and a three-man band. What was the thinking behind that, and how did you find slowly starting to obviously release some of the responsibilities that came with producing the content and editing, post-production, all of those things?
I mean, in the early days when it was a one-man band, I literally did everything. Literally everything from the web creation. I used RapidWeaver to build the website, and then RapidWeaver building the website, and then I did all the user management, taking on new users and all the support for the users as well, recording the shows, editing the shows, doing the post-production, and then publishing. And then the follow-up, and then social media as well. So it was a full-time job, no question. It was a full-time job, especially trying to keep a regular, consistent output as well. So one of the things I wanted to do was to make sure that the show was available every Friday or whatever. Because we did do, I know we do 2 shows a week. We did do 1 show a week, but I wanted to expand that and create a bit more content. So I think initially I gave I got a couple of people involved in the editing side of things. So I would create the show and then pass it to them, and they would edit it. And then I started to automate the production side of things. So I would then, once it had been edited, automate the post-production. And I thought, well, if I can automate it to a certain level, I can get other people involved in doing that. So it was a very slow process to build the team up. But, it's over time, it's been great. And the people that I've worked with and the people who are still on the team now are a fantastic group of people. So they've really helped me out in a big way.
Yeah, they've been fantastic. And obviously the transition from yourself to myself being the owner, one of the key elements of that actually being successful was the team that you were able to put in, because people may not realize we've got a team of 9 or 10 at ScreenCastsONLINE that work behind the scenes, whether it's other presenters, whether it's the post-production it's obviously JF as our master editor. It's it's amazing how much is actually involved behind the scenes and all of the things that you were able to build, because it's a very, very complicated setup. When you look at all of the automations that you've set up with things like Podio, with our newsletter system, with onboarding members, with the member system, managing the subscriptions, everything is pretty much automated. And it's been challenging being able to pick all of that up. I think I'm 90% of
I think you've done an incredible job. You really have. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons I was so pleased that, because when we talked about it, that you were interested, because obviously when I wanted to hand it on, I wanted to hand it on to a safe pair of hands. And you just fitted the bill perfectly. In fact, I know we've had the discussion before about how our careers have sort of mirrored each other and the different stages of where we are. It's sort of, you've been able to take over quite seamlessly. So that's good.
Well, you even look at us side by side here, and I can see how I'm going to look in 20 years' time by just looking to the left of the screen. That's kind of mad. Everything has been like a complete parallel with our lives so far.
Well, if you start growing a moustache, I'll start to get worried. So,
Well, actually, we're on Zoom, so I could get one of those virtual ones,
that's right.
like put on over the top. But I'll pass on that. I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So that's obviously 20 years. What about now, Don? What are you actually doing with yourself now that you've? I mean, obviously you're still with Screencast Online. You're still producing content for us, and you're still helping me behind the scenes, which is invaluable. But away from the content you're providing for us, what does your life consist of at the moment?
Well, before I do that, I should really mention the other presenters as well, because I mentioned the production staff and the editing staff and everything. But
please do.
Over time, obviously I brought really great people on to help me with the content creation. And initially that was due to illness. I think I wasn't well one particular week, and there's just no way I could record a show. So I think it was Todd. I think it was Todd Althoff was the first. I think
Todd was your first one.
Yeah. So Todd came on because he'd done some stuff on YouTube, and I liked what he was doing. So he came on to help me out. And then I thought, well, this is a good idea. So I could sort of perhaps step back a little bit. And then, obviously Alison, yourself, and lots of other people have stepped in and also contributing to the magazine as well, which has been great. So thumbs up to all the presenters, past and present, for helping out on that.
Well, another good thing about that is, especially for me, is I've got what I would call a skill set of apps that I feel like I could attack and I could get into and I could do justice. Whereas if there was a different kind of app, like maybe a photo editing app, I'm not a photographer. I am not any good with cameras or anything like that. Whereas if something comes in and somebody wants to have some more information on something like power photos or something like that, I'll just go, Alison, are you free? Are you able to do something? And then Alison will dive in and she will absolutely do that app justice. And then obviously we've got Mike with Obsidian. If there's anything to do with Obsidian, he's just the guy. Any productivity stuff, Mike's there. Darcy is great for like the wellness apps and things like that. And anything that's specified on iPad, Darcy's brilliant. So by bringing in those other presenters, you can really target specific applications and types, and it just makes the output and the content better, I think, because they put themselves into it. Yeah.
And although people did like me droning on, obviously it's a nice change for fresh voices and a fresh approach and different ways of presenting stuff as well. I think people appreciate that, so that's good. But going back to what I do now, well, obviously I'm semi-retired. I still produce some content for Screencast Online. I do the article as well, which keeps my hand in. I still like following technology, so I'm quite interested in that. I'm quite passionate about Bitcoin. Not crypto, Bitcoin, which again, there is a big difference. So I keep tabs on that pretty much, and I built a little website to educate people and stuff like that. But it's very much a work in progress. We still do a lot of traveling, so we do enjoy our traveling. So Barbara and I are luckily enough, while we're still healthy, to make the most of it and get out and about and travel around. Just become a grandfather as well. So
fantastic!
Congratulations. Little Rory, thank you very much. He's 10 weeks old. So that's my son Martin and his wife Amber. They had little Rory 10 weeks ago. So he's a belter. He's really, he's a lovely little kid. So we try and see them as often as we can. Still helping my daughter with her house. She moved into a house a while ago, and she's just having it refurbished. A lot of building work going on. So I've been the project manager for that, which she appreciates. And get the calls, Dad.
That never changes. Doesn't matter how old you get or what stage you are in life. It's always the same.
That keeps me busy. We've had some work done to our house as well. So we've got this new summer house, which we had built in the garden. So this is this is a new place for us to entertain and relax. And I'm actually sitting at the bar here, so it probably
Very nice.
you can't see, but we've got a little bar in the corner, and we've had the garden done, whatever. So yeah, no, things are good.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Good,
And I'm
yeah.
pleased you talked about your family there as well, because one thing that was prevalent with a lot of the videos you did was you talked about them, and sometimes you'd have photos of like holidays, and you talk about Nicola, and you know things that are happening sort of like in your family life. So there'll be ex-members, and when they contact me now and ask me about you, they're like, how's Don's family? And that wouldn't happen if you weren't injecting that personality into the screencast.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you try and strike a balance, but
of course.
But I think it humanizes you as well. I mean, we're not just faceless, faces on the screen or voices behind the screen. I think you need to build up a rapport with people. I mean, I always remember, and it's slightly sad, but the two cats, Nessie and Jessie, used to make regular appearances on the show because they were a great subject. So if I did a little video or I needed some photos, unfortunately we lost those a year or two ago. So that's a shame. Yeah, but because of the traveling we do now, we decided not to replace them with some new pets. But again, Nicola has a lovely dog now. And we love him to bits. So we sort of we're grandparents to the dog, so we look after him as well. Every
Yeah, I've seen Loki a few times on our video calls.
That we
have. And I do the same. I mean, Simba appears in quite a lot of the videos that I do. I shouldn't say him before my daughters, actually. I do put my daughters obviously in the video as well. Sometimes just talking about what we're up to and things that are going on. And as you say, it just humanizes us because we're just like regular people, the same as everybody else that watches these videos. We just happen to like creating content and sharing it and trying to help people.
Yeah, definitely.
And we've been doing that for 20 years. So on behalf of obviously everyone that has either been a member, is a current member, anyone that you've influenced or helped train, just want to say thank you for coming up with the idea of Screencasts Online, putting everything that you could into it to make it what it is today. And I will do everything I can to make sure that it's still around in 20 years time. And then maybe I'll be sitting where you are there. Well, probably it'll be a more virtual environment, but someone else will be on the right. Thank you very much, Don.
I know. Well, thanks. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to carry on creating content. I still enjoy doing it. So I'll carry on as long as you'll still have me.
Oh, well, that is as long as you're here. Cheers, Don. Take care.
All right. Cheers now, Lee.